In this video, you will learn what a context manager in Python is and how it helps you to prevent wrapping code in try finally blocks. After watching, you can create your own context manager that adds stopwatch functionality to arbitrary functions. Perhaps you have noticed the with keyword in Python. For example, opening a file can be wrapped in a with block like the example above. If you write code like that, you are using a context manager. So what is it? A context manager is a class that wraps around your code to make sure that something happens before and after your code, and providing a reference to the context manager from your code. Let's look at an example where this can be used. Look at this print statement. It divides 10 by 2 and the result is 5. Let's say you are interested in knowing how long it took to perform the calculation. To do this, we will measure the time. We start by printing the text started. Then we perform our calculation. And at the end, we will print how long it took to perform the calculation. Let's execute this code. So now we see the text started, we see the result of the calculation, and then we see how long it took to perform the calculation. Never mind the scientific calculation here, let's just say it is a very small number. Let's introduce a problem here. We will divide by 0. So when we execute this code, you probably have expected this, we get a 0 division error. How would you solve this? Well, we can wrap our code in a try block. Let's do that. So let's execute this code. Okay, we see that the function has started and we see that something went wrong. But the problem is, we never see how long it took, even if it went wrong. Well, there's a way to fix this too. There is a finally block. And this block will always be executed regardless of any errors. So we take the code from line 8 and we put it in line 11. And let's execute this code. Okay, we started the function. Something went wrong, but we still print how long it took, even if it went wrong. This is the result that we want. But this is a lot of code just to execute this line 7, where all the actual work happens. Line 7 is the only line that is really interesting to us, because that's where the calculation happens. So now we need all the ceremony code around it, just to time how long it took to perform the calculation, whether it succeeded or went wrong. There is a better way to solve this, and that is with a context manager. And a context manager executes some code before and after your function. And that is exactly what we want. So let's rewrite this code and now introduce a context manager. Since we are measuring time, we are going to call this context manager stopwatch. Let's remove this code and just start over. We create a class called stopwatch. This class is going to implement two methods, enter and exit. So what happens in the dunder enter method? This is where we are going to perform the task that need to happen before our code is executed. So we start by storing the time, and then we will print that our code has started. And here we are going to return self. This is not important for our example. You will need this when the calling code in your with block needs access to the stopwatch class. So the second method we are going to implement is the exit method. And this one needs additional arguments. our code can raise exceptions and we need to deal with them. So the dunder exit method gets 3 extra arguments: type, value, and traceback. Type is the type of error, varor is the error text, and the traceback is the traceback. So let's first just print that the function finished. And let's use the stopwatch. In our with block, we can now perform our calculation. We divide 10 by 2 again, and we execute the code. This is the expected result. We start the function, we see the result of the calculation, and again we see how long it took to perform the calculation. So what happens if we introduce our error again? We divide 10 by 0. When I execute this code, again I get an exception. In this case, a 0 division error. How do we deal with this? In the exit method, let's print what exactly is in type, value, and traceback. So I execute this code, and in the result here, we see that the type is the type of the error. Change this back to 10 divided by 2, and when we execute this, we see that these 3 values, the type, value, and traceback, are none, none, none. So what I will do here is I will just check for if the type is not none, and then we know that an error occurred. So now we say error occurred, and then after the error occurred, we will print how long it took to finish. So if I execute this, that works. But if we introduce the error and I execute this, what we will see is that we started the code, an error occurred, the code finished, but we still get this actual error. So I don't want to see this error again. I want that my code will just proceed after this. In order to do that, we need to indicate that we actually handled our error. And we do that by returning true in the dunder exit method. And now we get the expected result. Start the code, an error occurred, and it took this time to finish. Let me add one more stopwatch. And we will take one that actually works. And this shows us what we gained. We can now just wrap our code in a with stopwatch block, and then we will get a stopwatch out of the box. You have seen how a context manager helps you to free your code from try finally blocks while still handling errors and make sure resources are always cleaned up after the function ends. Now go back to your code base and see how many try finally blocks you can remove from your code.